Adrian's phone buzzed just as he was pouring coffee. He glanced at the screen and froze. The message was short, brutal and cold. "We're cutting all ties. Never come around again." His father's words glared at him through the screen, final and unyielding. At first, he thought it was a mistake, maybe a wrong number, a prank. But the number matched. His father's number. There was no doubt, no room for misunderstanding. His chest tightened. He blinked, hoping somehow the words would disappear. That reality would bend and allow him to ignore the message. But it didn't. The message sat there like a warning. A wall slammed shut in his face. Adrian felt the weight of it instantly. Years of trying, of holding the family together, of obeying the rules, all dissolved in a single line of text. He scrolled back, searching for a clue, an explanation, something to soften the blow. But there was nothing. Only emptiness and the cold sting of betrayal. He tried calling immediately, his hands trembling as he dialed the familiar number. It rang and rang and rang. Each tone felt heavier than the last. Then voicemail. He left a message, polite, calm, betraying none of the storm inside him. Still, there was no response. He called his mother next. Silence. The only answer he got was the same voicemail, a mechanical greeting as if nothing had happened. His heart sank. His parents had completely shut him out. He felt disoriented, like he was standing in a room he had always known, but suddenly couldn't find the exit. He sat down on the edge of the kitchen counter, staring blankly at the cup in his hand. It was warm, but it didn't comfort him. Nothing did. Not the familiar hum of the fridge, not the sunlight leaking through the blinds, not the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. Then came Mara's message. His sister Mara, the one person in the family he trusted to mediate, to smooth over conflicts, to be the voice of reason, had reached out. He hesitated before opening it, unsure whether he wanted to hear her voice. He pressed play, and the calmness in her tone was unnerving. It was controlled, almost detached, yet there was a tremor that suggested fear, or maybe guilt. Adrian, don't come home. I need to explain, but not over the phone. Meet me at the park, behind the old fountain. The words were simple, but the implication was huge. If she felt the need to meet him in secret, something serious had happened. Something that couldn't be solved with words through a screen. Adrian left immediately, the drive to the park feeling longer than usual, though it was barely 15 minutes away. His mind raced. Had he done something without realizing it? Was this a misunderstanding? Or worse, had someone actually betrayed him? His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, as the sky darkened slightly with approaching clouds, mirroring the storm brewing inside him. When he arrived, he saw Mara standing under the shadow of the fountain, her figure small, hesitant. She didn't wave, didn't run toward him. She just stood there, hands wrapped around herself, eyes avoiding his. There was a heaviness in the air, thick with unspoken truths. Adrian approached cautiously. Mara, what's going on? He asked, his voice steadier than he felt. She didn't answer immediately. She waited, as if measuring the right words, as if unsure whether he was ready to hear the truth. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and almost trembling. They think you stole the inheritance fund. All of it. Adrian blinked, shock rooting him to the spot. His mind refused to process the words fully. What? That's impossible. I would never. His voice faltered as the words failed him. He searched her face, looking for a sign that this was a cruel joke. There was none. Only truth. Bitter and sharp. Mara looked down at her feet. I told them. she said, barely audible. I needed the money. I made a mistake. I thought if I blamed you, it would solve things. I didn't know it would get this far. Adrian felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. The betrayal was staggering, not just because of what she did, but because of how calm she seemed. About it, there was no regret in her eyes. No fear of losing him as a brother. She had made a choice, and she had done it with precision. The weight of the realization pressed down on him like a physical force. Every memory of their childhood, the secrets they had shared, the games they had played, the nights spent whispering in the dark now felt tainted, as if they had been built on a fragile foundation that Mara had shattered in an instant. He stepped back, almost needing distance from her presence. Why would you do this? His voice cracked, a mixture of disbelief and hurt. Mara's silence was the answer. Her eyes briefly met his, and in that instant he saw something flicker: remorse. Fear, maybe even shame, but it was fleeting. She looked away, and the moment was gone. Adrian's mind spun with questions and emotions. How could she do this? How could she betray him to the parents he had spent years trying to please? The anger inside him started as a small flicker but grew rapidly, feeding on the shock, on the humiliation, on the pain. Yet, beneath it, there was another emotion. A dark, insidious curiosity, a seed of revenge that had been planted before he even realized it. Mara's words hung in the air, heavy with consequence. Adrian realized that the situation was irreversible. His parents had already made their judgment, and his sister had sealed his fate. There was no calling back, no explanations that could undo this moment. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was public, irreversible, a fracture in the family that would echo for years. And then he felt it. A sharp, cold resolve. The word revenge slipped into his mind, almost whispering, almost daring him. Not loud, not commanding, just there, suggesting. That action could be taken. That justice, his kind of justice, was possible. He didn't push it away. He let it settle, let it grow quietly under the pain, feeding on the shock and the anger. For the first time since reading the message, Adrian felt a flicker of control. The situation had been thrown at him without warning, without choice. But now, in this moment of betrayal, he realized that the choice was his. How he responded, how he acted, how he decided to deal with Mara would define not just the next few days but the years to come. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, to think clearly. But clarity was impossible. All he could do was look at his sister, who had betrayed him so calmly, and imagine the possibilities. His thoughts were a whirlwind: confrontation, exposure, justice, revenge. And yet, within that storm, there was a small, quiet voice reminding him of caution, reminding him that acting in anger could make things worse, that revenge might bring satisfaction, but could also destroy what little remained. Adrian finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "We'll figure this out," he said, though he wasn't sure if he meant it for Mara, or for himself, or for the family that had cast him aside. He turned away, needing space, needing air. He didn't know what the next steps would be, but he knew this. He wouldn't be silent. He wouldn't be a victim. Not anymore. As he walked away from the fountain, the words of his father echoed in his mind, sharp and unforgiving. But now, they weren't just words of rejection. They were a challenge, a spark. And Adrian, though hurt, though betrayed, felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A growing, fierce determination. Something was coming, and it would change everything. Adrian didn't sleep well that night. The betrayal haunted him in every shadow, every creak of the old house, He kept thinking about Mara's calm admission, the way she had confessed without a plea for forgiveness. She had admitted everything, yet she carried no real punishment. That thought burned inside him, hotter than anger or hurt. He wanted action. He wanted justice. He wanted revenge. But he also felt the gnawing confusion that comes with knowing the person you love has betrayed you. He felt the pulse of two conflicting cells inside him, one that wanted to destroy, one that wanted to understand. The next morning, Adrian started small. He retraced the events that led to the inheritance accusation. He checked bank statements, emails, and account records. Every detail confirmed one truth. Mara had indeed manipulated the situation to make it look like he stole money he had never touched. Adrian felt the cold clarity of it. His anger shifted slightly. It became sharper, more focused. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding or a family fight. This was a calculated act of betrayal. His sister had taken something precious and tried to rewrite reality. He watched her from a distance for the first time that week. He noticed her routines, the way she left the apartment early, the way she rushed to work, the tension in her shoulders. That betrayed her calm demeanor. She looked ordinary, fragile even, but Adrian knew better now. The calm exterior was a mask, one she had perfected to survive the guilt she carried. Observing her, he realized revenge would require careful planning. It wasn't enough to confront her verbally. It wouldn't be satisfying unless it left her facing the weight of what she had done. Still, there was a quieter voice inside him, one that whispered warnings. Revenge felt good in thought, but reality was harsher. If he exposed her, destroyed her life like she tried to destroy his, would he truly feel satisfaction? Or would it just perpetuate the pain, dragging both of them further into the mess? That thought unsettled him. He shook his head to dismiss it. He had no time for doubts yet. This stage belonged to planning, to strategy, to imagining the scales. Finally balancing. He began documenting everything. Every small lie Mara had told, every instant she tried to cover her tracks. He made files, notes, charts, timelines. The obsession grew naturally, almost scientifically. The more he learned, the clearer the path became. There was power in knowing, power in controlling information. He felt it coursing through him like electricity. And yet, amid the adrenaline, there was a strange sorrow. He realized he had become the opposite of what he used to be. Not trusting, constantly measuring, constantly watching. He didn't like this version of himself, but he embraced it because it was necessary. Days passed, and Adrian's emotional storm deepened. At night, he lay awake, picturing Mara confronting the consequences. He imagined her losing her job, her reputation, the trust she had from friends, the life she had carefully built. He imagined the satisfaction, the moment of triumph when she realized she could not escape the consequences of her actions. But then, the other side of his mind spoke again. He imagined seeing her broken, humiliated, crying, and he realized he didn't want to enjoy her suffering. He only wanted her to acknowledge the truth, to face the weight of her betrayal. The line between revenge and justice blurred, and he felt the tension build like a knot in his chest. He confronted his emotions daily, testing them, analyzing them. Was this about money? Recognition? Or was it about being seen, being acknowledged, as the person who had always been loyal and true while his sister had hidden behind deception? The answer was clear. It was about the principle of fairness, the balance of truth. He wanted his story told, his innocence proven, but he also wanted Mara to understand the harm she caused Dot at work. Adrian's mind wandered constantly. Every conversation reminded him of Mara. Every mundane task felt heavy with unspoken tension. He began to imagine scenarios, each one more extreme than the last. He considered emailing their parents anonymously, leaving evidence that only he could connect. He imagined confronting Mara in public, forcing her to admit her deceit. Each plan made his pulse quicken, but each also left him unsettled. He realized that planning revenge was intoxicating but exhausting. His sleep suffered. His appetite waned. His focus became sharper yet narrower. He was spiraling into a single-minded pursuit, and he knew it. One evening, Adrian finally reached a breaking point. He had gathered enough evidence to expose Mara completely. He had emails, documents, even testimony from a co-worker who had overheard her manipulating details about the inheritance. His hand hovered over the keyboard, ready to send a message to their parents, to reveal everything. This was it, the moment that could change everything. But as he stared at the screen, he saw Mara in his mind's eye. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't laughing. She was standing at the same fountain, looking tiny and fearful, confessing everything quietly. And in that memory, he saw the spark of fear, the flicker of shame in her eyes. Adrian hesitated. The realization struck him like a cold wave. Revenge was within reach, but at what cost? He would gain satisfaction, perhaps, but he would also destroy something fragile, something human. He would become the very thing he hated, cold, calculating, unfeeling. And for what? A brief moment of victory. The thought made him pause, weight pressing down on his chest like a physical force. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He replayed their childhood, their whispered conversations at night, the times Mara had defended him from their parents' anger. She had made a terrible mistake. Yes, but she wasn't entirely cruel. She was flawed, human, and human beings make mistakes. That understanding didn't erase his anger, but it complicated it, adding layers of consideration he hadn't anticipated. The desire for revenge was still there, but now it was tangled with something else. The question of morality, of whether destruction could ever truly fix the past. By morning, Adrian made a decision. He wouldn't act impulsively. He would wait. He would observe. He would let Mara live with her guilt, but he wouldn't immediately strike. He would consider the consequences, not just for her, but for himself. Revenge was tempting, powerful, but it was also dangerous. And he wasn't ready to risk everything, his own sense of self, for a fleeting victory. Still, he prepared silently. He kept collecting evidence, kept refining his understanding of the situation. Every move Mara made, every lie she told, became part of his growing map of knowledge. He felt like a chess player, anticipating moves and counter-moves, considering strategies, weighing consequences. The tension grew, a constant hum in the background of his life. He imagined the moment he could confront her fully, with undeniable proof, and the anticipation made his heart pound. And yet, beneath it all, a small voice whispered warnings. Are you becoming what you hate? Are you letting anger guide you? More than reason? Adrian tried to ignore it, but it lingered like a shadow. He began to understand that revenge wasn't just about making Mara pay. It was about understanding himself, his limits, his capacity for patience, and his ability to act without losing his humanity. The struggle wasn't external anymore. It was internal. The fight was for his soul, his moral compass, not just the satisfaction of seeing someone else fold to dot by the end of the week. Adrian was ready, not to act immediately, but to confront the reality of his feelings. He had seen Mara's flaws, her guilt, her humanity. He had measured his anger, his frustration, his desire for justice, and he had realized something important. Planning revenge could give him control, but acting on it could destroy him in the process. The question wasn't whether he could expose her. The question was whether he should. And that question would follow him until he found the answer. Adrian woke that morning with a restless energy that made it hard to stay still. The plan he had been refining all week sat in his mind like a loaded gun. Every scenario, every piece of evidence, every carefully tracked lie Mara had told swirled together, forming a moment he had been waiting for. Confrontation. Today he could reveal everything. He could expose her to their parents, make her face the consequences, reclaim the truth, and finally feel the vindication he had craved. But there was a tension now, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. He felt it in his chest, a pressure that made him question what victory really meant. He looked at Mara's apartment across the street from the cafe where he had been sitting. She was leaving for work, carrying a small briefcase, walking as if nothing had happened, as if the storm that had torn through their lives had left her untouched. Adrian's fingers itched to act. He imagined sending an anonymous message to their parents, attaching every email, every document, every shred of proof he had meticulously gathered. He imagined the shock on their faces, the disbelief turning into anger directed at her. He imagined the rush of satisfaction, the sense of justice finally done. It was intoxicating. He closed his eyes and saw it vividly. Mara confronted, shaking, her calm mask shattered, the truth finally breaking free. But, even as the images played in his mind, another picture intruded. Mara under the fountain, confessing quietly, small and human. She hadn't been cruel. She had been desperate. She had made a terrible choice. Yes, but she hadn't intended to destroy him completely. That vision, so fragile and vulnerable, made his fingers falter over the keyboard. He had planned every detail for days, but now doubt crept in. Revenge was within reach, but so was the chance to take a different path, one that might preserve something of his humanity. Adrian left the cafe and walked the streets slowly, thinking. Each step felt heavy with anticipation. He imagined how Mara would feel if he exposed her, how the weight of their parents' anger would crush her. He imagined her looking at him, realizing he had taken control, that he had the power to ruin her life. And he realized, suddenly, that he didn't want to see her broken. He wanted recognition. He wanted justice, but he didn't want her to suffer irreparably. The revelation struck him hard. Revenge could satisfy for a moment, but it could also destroy something permanent, something neither of them could repair. He reached the park, the same place where she had confessed. The fountain stood quietly, water flowing steadily, a stark contrast to the storm inside him. Mara was there, waiting. She didn't run to him, didn't hide, just stood with her hands clasped, shoulders tense. Her eyes met his, uncertain, asking silently if he had made his choice. Adrian walked slowly toward her, feeling the pull of his emotions. Anger, betrayal, desire for retribution, but also compassion, understanding, and a strange need for closure. "I know everything," he said finally, voice steady but quiet, almost conversational. "All of it. Every lie, every manipulation, every email, every word you twisted." He paused, watching her reaction. Her face fell, a mixture of shame and fear. She looked smaller than ever, but not defeated. Just human. Adrian realized he could see her clearly now, stripped of the calm mask she wore in front of the world. She swallowed hard, voice shaking. I know," I was wrong. I didn't think it through. I panicked. I thought I could fix things by shifting the blame. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't try to excuse herself. She simply admitted it, openly, like a confession that had been long overdue. Adrian's mind raced. He could unleash all he had gathered. He could send the evidence, confront her parents, watch the full weight of consequences fall upon her. He imagined the shock in her eyes, the collapse of her carefully controlled world. He imagined the satisfaction, the validation, and he felt it. That rush of power, of control, was undeniable. For a moment it was almost intoxicating. Then he looked at her again. She was trembling slightly, eyes wide, lips pressed together. He saw vulnerability, fear, guilt. He realized that exposing her would not only punish her, but also change him irrevocably. He would no longer be the brother who had been wronged. He would become the one who inflicted pain, the one who had taken satisfaction in destroying someone he once loved. The thought hit him like a physical blow. Could he live with that version of himself? Could he look in the mirror and see the same person he had been before the betrayal? Adrian took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. The evidence he had collected was still there, ready to be used. He could act at any moment. But the real test was not whether he could, but whether he should. He realized that revenge was a choice, and choices define who we are more than circumstances do. He could destroy her. Yes, but that wouldn't repair the past. That wouldn't bring back the family he had lost. That wouldn't heal the wound. Inside him, he thought of the anger, the humiliation, the betrayal he had felt. They were valid, and they deserved acknowledgement. But he also thought of the future, of the possibility of moving beyond pain, instead of letting it fester. He wanted something more lasting than a moment of victory. He wanted closure, understanding, and perhaps even a chance for redemption for both of them. Finally, Adrian made his choice. He stepped closer to Mara, letting the tension in his body ease slightly. "I'm not going to expose you," he said quietly. "Not today. Not like this. But you need to make this right. Not for me, not for our parents, but for yourself. You need to face what you've done and take responsibility." Her eyes widened, disbelief mixing with relief. I will," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I'll tell them. I'll fix this." Adrian nodded. He felt a strange release, like a weight lifting from his chest. The tension that had consumed him for days began to dissipate, replaced by something unfamiliar. Clarity. He realized that revenge had been a temptation, a seduction, but it wasn't the answer. Choosing to act with restraint, to demand accountability without destruction, had given him a power that was deeper, more lasting, and more meaningful. They walked together to their parents' house later that day. Mara spoke the truth, confessing everything. The confrontation was messy, emotional, and far from perfect. Their parents reacted with a mix of anger, disappointment, and relief. Trust wasn't instantly rebuilt. The past couldn't be erased. But Adrian felt something shift within him. He wasn't consumed by the desire for revenge anymore. He had taken control of his actions, his morality, and his future. As they left the house, Adrian felt a quiet strength growing inside him. He had been wronged, yes. He had felt betrayal, anger, and the intoxicating pull of revenge. But he had also chosen restraint, understanding, and accountability. He realized that revenge might satisfy briefly, but it rarely brings peace. True strength, he understood now, comes from the ability to act with intention, not impulse. With morality, Not rage. And for the first time in weeks, Adrian felt free. Free from anger, free from obsession, free from the need to punish. He had faced the ultimate test and chosen a path that preserved his humanity. The lesson was clear: revenge is fleeting, but wisdom, restraint, and understanding endure. He had won, not by hurting someone else, but by mastering himself.